As I'm learning and discovering new things about myself, I'm looking for new ways to give back to younger athletes, whether it be with sports stuff, academic stuff, approaching an athlete as a whole person and looking at their journey holistically. I think that's something that I aim to do and strive to do going forward.
Welcome back, everybody, to another exciting episode of the Hey Where'd You Go podcast. I'm your host, Collin Kushner, and we have another epic guest, former University of Washington running back and former NFL running back, Bishop Sankey. Bishop, what's going on, man?
What's going on, Collin? Appreciate you for having me on.
You were born in Wadsworth, Ohio. You spent some time there with your mom and grandparents, and then you ended up moving to the West Coast to Washington State, where your dad's in the Air Force. Can you kind of talk about what it was like growing up in that Air Force environment and how it's kind of shaped you today?
Not only my dad, but pretty much like both of my uncles and my grandfather served some time in the military. My dad was 20 years in the Air Force. Both my uncles were 20 years in the Army. And I think it's shaped me. It's just taught me a lot about just like discipline and hard work, and that work ethic was really instilled in me at a young age. My dad also coached Little League football when I was growing up. So that's who really introduced me to like the game of football. And he's still coaching to this day. He's a high school coach in Nashville. So, he's just done a great job of like instilling like hard work and dedication and just trying to always maintain that competitive edge.
How was your dad as a football coach? Obviously, with that background in the military, I can only imagine what that was like for you as a little kid, growing up.
He was just there to guide me and make sure and hold me accountable and make sure that, I was, working hard because I had dreams of being a pro athlete since I was a little kid. Playing Division I college ball was another big dream of mine. And so he knew this is what I wanted to do. And he just was like, all right, well, this is how you get there. You got to work hard and do like one thing extra per day. That's going to get you closer to your dream. And so that's something that I did like as a kid, growing up.
And I was going to say, as a little kid, growing up with those dreams and those aspirations, like how imperative was it to kind of hold that in the back of your mind along that journey? Did it kind of help and make things a little bit easy for you, knowing as you're sprinting up those hills and as you're doing those challenging workouts, like, hey, like this is ultimately, literally and figuratively going to get me where I would like to go?
Visualization is a big thing, not only as an athlete, but in really anything. It's important to like dream big. That's something I always wanted to do, was just dream big and like shoot for the stars. I had this whole shoot for the stars mentality. And if you miss that, you'll land amongst the clouds. And I tried to take that approach like while I was training and while I played Little League in high school and college, always keeping the big picture in mind, but sort of backtracking and realizing like what steps do I need to take in order to achieve that dream or achieve that goal. And so, yeah, when I was working out, running hills, doing extra stuff outside of normal like team activities, I would always just think about like my goal, my end goal, my dream, and I would kind of just allow my dreams to like drive me in that way.
I love that, man. I think it's important for all of us to be dreamers, in some respect. I think that's, at least from my perspective, I'm a fellow dreamer as well, with lots of dreams and aspirations, and still to this day. But I think those have helped. I think no matter how things ended up turning out for whatever it was that I was striving for, I think having that type of mentality really helped me remain positive, I guess. I don't know. It helped, even if I maybe missed a little bit.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think just remaining optimistic about the possibilities is important. Obviously, life happens, adversity happens, but if you can look back on your experiences and really try to focus on the good that came out of those experiences, regardless of how they went, I think that's going to help give you like that energy and give you that resiliency to just move forward and bounce back and go into whatever endeavor you have next, or go into that next thing that you're working towards. So, yeah, I think just remaining optimistic about the possibilities and being persistent in the face of adversity is something that I've always tried to remind myself of and stay true to.
Who instilled that shoot for the stars mentality? Was that your mom, your dad, a friend, a coach, an extended family member, or maybe was that something that you just discovered on your own?
Yeah, I think it was just like a combination. Like my dad, mom, family members, they really do say it takes a village. And I think, just different like family members through the years, I've just looked at their example. I looked at my grandfather as an example on both sides, but on my dad's side, my grandfather, he's pretty much blind in both eyes, and just he's been that way for a while. He's had like cornea transplants and multiple procedures on his eyes to try to revive his eyesight. And just knowing like what he's gone through and struggles he's faced and how he remains positive and he gets up every day and walks in his purpose, or what he believes his purpose is to be, that's just something that I use as like motivation. And I see like how he, fights every day to do things even with his, eyesight and his condition. So just stuff like that. And then also coaches too, like my high school coach, who was a great mentor of mine. I went to high school at Gonzaga Prep High School in Spokane, and Coach McKenna, he's one of the more successful coaches in the state of Washington. I think he won this. They won the state not too long ago, and they're always like playoff contenders. And he's just always expressed like, he had like 3 words he would say, or 4, I don't know how many, but he would always say like, adversity, how do you respond? And while that's just like a simple message and it's easy to kind of gloss over it, those words are just really like, couldn't be more true. It's like adversity happens, but ultimately it's not what happens, it's how you respond to what happens. And so those are just things that have always kind of stuck with me through the years, and just messages from coaches, people who have, communicated positive messages to me. Like I've always kind of just held on to those things and just try to remind me of those voices and those people who have had that influence on me.
Well, your high school football coach, David McKenna, he described you as quiet, humble, the hardest working kid he's ever been around. Why was it so important to conduct yourself in that manner? And how important are these characteristics just for athletes in general?
It just goes back to just that dream I had as a little kid. I grew up watching like Ohio State and, Miami in like the early 2000s with like Willis McGahee and, Maurice Claret and Craig Krenzel. And then as I grew older, I remember when I moved out west, I really started focusing on like Pac-12, like University of Washington, Wazoo, the Apple Cup, and of course like Reggie Bush too, like before that as well. But just like I guess my imagination is something that, has played a big role in that. And just, like I said, just envisioning the end goal and just thinking about the possibilities and listening to coaches and just trying to take what they said to heart and really try to like work hard and go the extra mile. And I think through time, I saw like how my hard work was paying off. And I saw that I actually had potential and I could, really could potentially play Division I football. So I just tried to keep that same mentality through high school. And Gonzaga Prep, it's a pretty like challenging high school. When I first moved out to Washington from Ohio, I can remember like Gonzaga Prep was like, they're a private high school and they like really pride themselves on academics. And like the middle school that I came from previously before going to high school in Washington, it just was a challenge for me to make that transition in such an environment that like is like demands so much academically from their students. But I think it just helped me pay off, or it just paid off in the long run for me, because like I was never really the like smartest or like the biggest or the most like or the fastest or just naturally talented. So I think being put in those environments that like force you to grow and challenge you, I think that's kind of just wired me a certain way to not be afraid to get out of my comfort zone and continue to push and strive to be better going forward.
When you knew in your mind, body, and soul that you had a future playing D1 football and the NFL possibly coming immediately after, like, what did that feel like, given that this was a dream that you had since you were a kid? Can you kind of describe, is there a way to describe that feeling?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great feeling, just seeing your dreams materialize, you work so hard, and just to see like um evidence that you're actually making progress and getting closer to your goals and stuff. I think it was just important, and it meant a lot for me, and it was just something that was just a dream come true, really. I remember going in at the University of Washington. I was like fourth string. Like I didn't start off going to the University of Washington expecting to be a starter. I really There were other schools I could have went to where I had a better chance to play early, but I think just uh, things worked out when I went to the University of Washington. I really fell in love with the campus. I fell in love with the coaching staff and everything, and it just felt right when I visited. And so I think, yeah, a big part of just I guess reaching your goals is just betting on yourself and taking a chance on yourself, regardless of how things look.
It's nice that things started to just click and fall into place, because I think a majority of the things that we do in life, there's always maybe a little bit of a fight, and it doesn't always. It's not like an easy soft landing. It's nice to hear that your decision to go to the University of Washington, it just felt right, and you could just go with that feeling and move on, instead of, wait, did it feel right? Did it not feel right? And then there starts that inner monologue of questioning decisions that you make.
Yeah, I think like it was one of those, I guess, rare times or special times in my life where everything kind of did like work together and everything kind of worked out. Because like it takes a lot. It's just to have the opportunity to play in the NFL. So many things have to go right. Not only as a player do you have to be a good player, but you also have to play for a coaching staff who trusts you and believes in you and trusts you enough to put you on the field and give you an opportunity. And then you also have to remain injury free and just be in the right system and environment. And I feel like so many other factors sort of play together that enable success. And so at that time at Washington, like everything just kind of worked together, and things. I was healthy for those 3 years. I didn't face any serious injuries. And my coaching staff, they trusted me enough to put me on the field. So I just, everything kind of like worked out in that sense. So I'm definitely thankful for it to this day, because without my experience at UW, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to play in the NFL and then, do what I'm doing now. So.
In 2013, your junior season at the University of Washington, you rushed for 1,870 yards, which is still a school record, and 20 rushing touchdowns. What made that season so special for you?
Really, I just think a combination again of things like I was coming off a strong sophomore season, so my confidence level was higher than it was the previous year. I was, what you would call battle tested as a player. So I had been in tough games. I had faced tough defenses. I had that in-game experience that I didn't have the previous year. So I think I was able to build off of that. Also, Coach Sarkisian, he was our offensive coordinator that year, and he's been an innovative offensive mind for years, and so he at that time I think up-tempo offenses were just now coming to the forefront. Of course, like Chip Kelly ran the up-tempo offense at Oregon back then around that time, and then I think Sark kind of took a page from his book and implemented that at the University of Washington, and that just helped a lot, because just based on that offense and how things are run, like if the defensive line or linebackers fit the wrong gap or they're found like out of position, like literally that just opens the lanes up for just big runs, big plays. And so I think that was just that, and just my mindset and confidence as a player really attributed to that, my junior season, and just all the success that came with it.
After your career at Washington, you ended up declaring for the NFL draft after your junior season, and you were drafted by the Tennessee Titans in the second round of the 2014 NFL draft, the first running back taken in that draft. Can you kind of describe that moment, that feeling? Like, I don't know if you close your eyes for a second, if you can kind of bring us back to that moment in time.
It didn't feel real. Like it just felt like all the years of preparation, and that moment was here where you get drafted and you're lucky enough to get your name called during the draft. And I was just at my dad's house, and I had family out, and everybody was just having a good time, and I was celebrating with family. And yeah, we I just remember getting on the phone and just thinking about like what was next and trying to anticipate like, what it would be like moving to a new city, starting with a new team, getting your start in the NFL. And so there were just so many thoughts, I guess, racing through my mind at the time, but it was just a good moment, a special moment. And yeah, it was just like that was the day like where my dreams came true. So I was just excited for that.
The Titans had Chris Johnson. They released him shortly before they drafted you. Was there any pressure on your end to fill shoes like that? Because Johnson rushed for more than 2,000 yards. I think it was in 2009. Did you feel pressure on that end, or was that something that didn't even cross your mind?
I think it's hard to just ignore like all the noise and like, knowing that you're gonna be the successor of like Chris Johnson. And he was just obviously one of the best running backs in the NFL at the time. So I did feel a lot of, pressure coming in, and not just pressure from like the external noise, but just from internally myself, wanting to do a good job and wanting to, pick up the plays and just get acclimated to a new system. And so I definitely felt pressure, as a young rookie. And that was one of my main things. Like when I first moved to Nashville, was just trying to pick up the playbook as quickly as possible and get used to the new system that I was playing in.
How are you able to temper those expectations? Because I think the noise on the outside, of course, like that's what everyone sees, that's what everyone hears. The internal noise, what's in our own mind, that's unique to us, and that's almost like it's just something that we hear. Like how are you able to kind of work through that internal noise, or just and I don't just mean that playing in the NFL, just in a general sense throughout your life?
Yeah, well, I think I mean, I feel like I'm normally pretty good at that, at working through like that. I guess working through that internal pressure and noise. But during that time, that was just kind of like a challenging time. Just a roller coaster of a season, my rookie year, and then second year as well, because our coach was fired and everything, and just we weren't the best team. I think we won 2 games my rookie year, and then my second year we won 4 games. And a lot of that time we were like rotating running backs. We had like a running back by committee, and so we were rotating quite a few guys, and so it was just hard to really kind of gain that same confidence that I had as a player in college, with just like because I want to say sometimes the running back who had the most touches in a game would only really have maybe like 5 or 6 touches, and that's because we like would rotate so many guys throughout the span of a game. And then by like halftime, unfortunately, like we would be in situations where we were like forced to throw the ball more so than run the ball. So I think just working through that internal noise was a challenge my rookie year and my like rookie year and second year in the league, just because things weren't going how they were, expected, I guess, on the field. So, but normally, I guess in the big picture, like I've always tried to be one to like think positive and remain optimistic and continue to move forward. Like and just try to use your past experiences to build off of, and just do things like everyday things, like just words of affirmation, like speak positive self-talk, stuff like that. And so that's kind of what I focused on throughout my college career when things were going great, and then professional career when things were like a little more rocky, or just more of a, I guess, a real uncertainty as to how things would turn out. So yeah.
I think those little things like affirmations or journaling or meditation, I think those are all so important. And it's not just doing it when things are good. My counselor and I chat about it all the time. And it's not only about like when things are good, but when things aren't good, continuing to do those things, whether it be the affirmations, a journaling, or a meditation, to keep that like consistency level and to kind of maybe mitigate those moments of turmoil, I guess would probably be the best way to describe it on my end. I do want to, kind of touch on something you mentioned earlier. You said that your high school coach, David McKenna over at Gonzaga Prep, he talked about adversity and how you handle adversity. And, in the NFL, you definitely had your share of that. After 2 years, you were cut by the Titans. How did you handle the adversity, and how did you push through that?
I just, again, just try to move forward and keep, I guess, focusing on the positive, like even though things were happening, like getting released, that's never good. That never feels good. Getting cut, it sucks. But it's like, okay, now what can I do next? Don't let what you can no longer do affect what you can do. Like, bad things that happen, they're in the past. Like, how do you move forward, and how do you try to look for new opportunities and stuff? And so when I got released, from the Titans, that wasn't the first time I was cut, or that wasn't the last time I was cut. So for me, it was just like I called my agent up and wanted to just hear about like the options and that's kind of what you do. Like, you just call your agent and hope for the best. And so through this whole time, I was just like continuing to train and stay ready in case I got a call. And so I ended up bouncing around my third year, played with the Patriots briefly, the Kansas City Chiefs, and then the Minnesota Vikings. Then I ended the year, my third season with the Vikings, and then was called back my fourth year and played with the Vikings as well. And so I ended up tearing my ACL that fourth preseason, that was just bad timing is also. But I think, I just try to always think about like, what could I be doing despite the circumstances to get better and improve my, for down the line and for the future.
I don't know if you have an answer to this, but the Titans only gave you 2 years. And when I think about just sports in general, giving somebody 2 years to understand a system, to deal with coaching staff changes, player personnel changes, like that's not a lot of time. The short leashes that you have in pro sports it's crazy, man. Cause like 2 years is not enough time. That is not enough time from my POV. Like what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's just kind of the culture in sports. They want production instantly, in a lot of sense, or a lot of times. Like, they want guys to come in and just be, remarkable, from the bat, off the bat. And that's kind of just how it is with, in sports. I think with the Titans, they wanted to just give me a chance maybe somewhere else, even though it didn't work out with them. They were probably thinking like, hey, he'll get another chance somewhere else and, be able to make the best out of it, somewhere else. So I think that's kind of just what their thought process was at the time. But going into my third preseason, I felt like I had a really good, preseason. But of course, they drafted Derrick Henry, who's like one of the best running backs in the league now. And then they brought in DeMarco Murray, who was like Pro Bowler at the time. So it was just a full running back room. And I was also kind of dealing with like, little injuries. I had like a high ankle sprain during my third preseason that I've suffered the last preseason game that year. And looking back, I probably should have like brought more attention to it, but I kind of saw the writing on the wall, and I felt like if I would have like spoke up about it or said, brought more attention to it, that could affect like my potential opportunities down the line with other teams. Looking back, I probably should have said something and then would have had to, get it x-rayed and stuff. But I was just like, oh, I'll tough it out. I'll deal with it. It'll get better through my whole third year. So really my whole third year, I was just like battling this high ankle sprain that I kind of swept under the rug. And then going into my fourth year, my ankle started feeling better. And I had a good preseason with the Vikings, was doing well. I had a legitimate chance to make the roster my fourth year. But they drafted Dalvin Cook, they brought in Latavius Murray, and Jerick McKinnon was there, I think he's still playing. So that was another full room. So I had a legitimate chance to make the roster because they did keep a fourth back that year. Even though I was on IR, they brought another guy in who was like on the roster that year. So, but unfortunately, tore my ACL that year, and it was just bad timing. So for me, like after that happened, I just wanted to, my biggest thing was working to heal up and come back from the ACL tear, but then also like try to figure out like think about like, what I want to go into after football ends, because at that point in time, I wasn't sure of like what my future in football looked like, just given how things had gone up to that point. And I know like running back shelf life isn't long, it's like one of the, most devalued positions in the league. And so I just think that's just, we see what's going on now with running backs. So, those are like guys that are, super productive, main guys on the offense. So I just think that's at that time, knowing that like how running backs are viewed, I just tried to figure out ways to set myself up for, I guess, life after football, or start working towards that now. So when the time did come to actually transition completely, it would be like as easy as possible.
Did you have any idea of what you wanted to do post football? Like, did you know, like, hey, like I want to be a lawyer, or like?
No, I mean, I knew I wanted to work in sports. You know, I wanted to work in sports like management or sports administration. And somebody like dropped a seed in my head at the University of Washington about law school. Like they were like, "Oh, have you thought about law school?" Because they were studying for the LSAT at the time, and they were like, "Well, you write good papers, you like reading, you don't mind reading and stuff like that. So, have you ever thought about law school? Like, if I'm like, so that's really the first time the seed was dropped in my head about like potentially going to law school. But I knew a law degree would just provide like versatility and provide you with different options and the skill sets and knowledge to work in really any sector, and definitely in sports, because like I think you can do so much. Like you learn about contracts, you learn about like regulatory issues, you learn just I just think like law school can uh, provide versatility in the job market. So that's kind of something that was like in the back of my head, but I knew I wanted to still like stay connected to sports somehow, some way. I remember at the University of Washington when I was like playing my freshman year, like we're playing like it was during like preseason or training camp basically. So, we're going through the dog days of training camp, and I'm like looking on the sidelines, and people are out there watching. And I see Scott Woodward just, kind of walking around. I didn't know who he was at the time because I was like a freshman, and wasn't really aware like who he was. I was like, oh, who's that guy? Like, and he's the athletic director, and he's just like walking around like, talking to people, talking to the players. I'm like, dang, I mean, he looks pretty happy, like he's just hanging out, like watching like University of Washington football team, and that was sort of my first impression of like an athletic director. And so not knowing, like he deals with way more than that, and he has tons of responsibility, but that kind of was like, oh, okay, like that kind of sparked my interest in working in like college athletics or athletic administration. That was like my first impression of what an athletic director was. And obviously he's at LSU now. He's doing a great job. So, but yeah, that's kind of, I took you all over the place, but yeah, that was kind of something that I knew I wanted to do, which was like work in sports whenever football ended. I'm not exactly sure how that looked, but I knew like law school would help me get to that point.
Well, dude, this is going to be perfect. We're going to get you to be the next director of athletics at Arizona State. You'll bring the Sun Devils back to the promised land. And then everybody at University of Washington is going to be like, what the heck? And then you're going to be like, hey, this guy Collin, I jumped on his podcast. We were talking about life and my career and my journey. And he planted that Arizona State AD seed.
Hey, you never know. You never know. You never know down the line. I mean, I would love to work for like a pro team or college team, or a union or something. So yeah, trying to keep my options open, I guess, in the sports world.
Now you're in law school at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. You're an SEC guy now. I had Brandon Lloyd, the former NFL wide receiver, on the podcast not too long ago, and it was super interesting because he went back to the University of Illinois, I think like 20 years after he left for the NFL, to get his undergraduate degree. And in an article, somebody said to him, "You don't need a degree. You are you." Why was it so important to go back to Washington, get that undergraduate degree? And do you think it's even more important to go back to school to further your education now?
I'm biased because I just always have been one to, I guess, see the value in education, and that really like I guess was crystallized when I went to the University of Washington, and I just read, that's the first time I was like, okay, like what would I want to do after football? Like you hear it all the time as an athlete growing up, like, sports don't define you, sports, you're more than an athlete. And, sometimes it takes more time for you to actually start believing that and taking actions towards being more than just an athlete, because sports is such a big part of your identity, and society holds sports at such a high value. But like really when I was at the University of Washington, um, I just always knew that like there was like life after football, and that's when I really first started like taking those steps and working towards thinking about what I wanted to do when like football ended. But I think getting your education is important because it just not only like do you get a degree or a piece of paper, but I think it also just develops your character in a lot of ways, especially when it comes to discipline and study habits and developing a love for like learning and stuff like that. You never know, even if you're a professional football player and you play 10, 15 years and you make, life money that to last you for your entire life, you still want to, sort of have this intellectual curiosity that's going to allow you to do things after you're retired. Like if you say you start a business or you start a foundation, you kind of want to like know at least what's going on or know about the different moving parts of your organization or of like know the basic concepts of like business. I think you don't want to just passively like push those responsibilities on people who are running your business or organization and not really and be ignorant to all that's going on and all that you need to know to like actually run a successful business or have a successful or know what to do with your money, like in terms of like investing and stuff like that. So I think an education sort of just lays that foundation and teaches you like ways to like basically teaches you how to be a more effective learner. And also like for me, like I knew like, well, given how things were going, I didn't make enough money that would last me for like the rest of my life. So I knew like an education was also a vehicle to just provide a second career and allow me to like pursue other interests and fall into like a second passion. And so that's kind of why I chose to like always valued like education, even post grad education, like a master's degree or doctorate's degree or something like that. But I think definitely like education is important, even if it's not formal education, always trying to educate yourself, like self-education and just learning whatever your interests and passions are, like just, I guess, learning how to, operate in those spaces. And, I think it's just like, helps in so many different ways. So
I don't really think I hit my stride educationally until I was at Arizona State. Then I loved it. Like I loved going to, I had never loved going to class prior to college in my entire life. And I'm in this environment. And I remember after I graduated with a degree in broadcast journalism, I told my mom, like, I'm never going back to school ever again. And she said like, hey, don't say that. I haven't gone back to school, but it's interesting now as a 32-year-old man, like I really have thought to myself, like, it would be cool to go back to school and to learn more and to expand and to grow. And I think those are the opportunities that it provides.
Yeah. I mean, even like guys like Brandon Lloyd, like you said, oh, like the guy was like, oh, you don't have to go back to school. You're Brandon Lloyd. It's like, okay, down the line, you may have marketing deals or different endorsement opportunities just based off of your name. And, you would want to like kind of know what's going on in the contracts or be able to maybe learn more about the marketing space or the NIL space to kind of know how to leverage your brand, leverage who you are as a person, and just try to utilize your brand for, your benefit. And so, like I said, you never know, I think, education it's just important. And no matter who you are, just to always educate and grow and continue to learn.
Well, you hit on such a great point, dude. It's like you want to know, like, we're not going to be a professional in everything that we do. That's just not physically or mentally possible. But you want to somewhat be in the know or have like some level of understanding. And to your point, like, yeah, like if you're in on those big deals, and you have that educational backing that was able to kind of give you a bird's eye view into that, I think you're going to be more confident and you're going to be more confident in your ability, and you're going to be able to ask those questions as opposed to just like, I play in the NFL, this is who I am, and you take care of it. Because I understand that is an easier avenue to take than going back to school or learning about whatever it is that you're trying to do.
Yeah, or even like I would say like with investments, like you hear horror stories all the time of like, investments and financial advisors and stuff. And I think I know there's only, oftentimes a few bad apples can sort of ruin it for everyone. But I would say like as players, just kind of knowing at least the basics of like investment strategy and like different types of investments, and just like you said, knowing how to ask those questions, about like, ask your financial advisor or ask someone like, okay, what's going on, or what, explain more to me about this just so you can kind of know what's going on? Because you hear a lot of horror stories about pro athletes and stuff, and them just making bad investment choices, and so I think a lot of that could be avoided if they valued just educating themselves and learning about those types of things, and not just going purely off of the fact that they are a former athlete, and really just for them to work. Like, I think it's important for athletes to just always work to expand their identity beyond just being an athlete, because life is long. Your professional career, even if you play 10 years in the league, you're like, what, 30 years old, and you still have all this like life to going to be so many more like things you're going to be a part of, and opportunities that are going to come that aren't necessarily tied to like you being the best athlete possible. So I think, yeah, it's just important to know these things, and education can help prepare players for life after football in a lot of ways. And it doesn't have to be a whole degree. Like, guys can get like certificates, or just, YouTube now, YouTube University, that's a thing. So, I think there's so many different resources out here to like learn from and prepare yourself for whatever it is you want to go into when the game's over.
This is why I love what you're doing and how you're thinking about going back into athletics, like athletic administration at a university, or going to work for an NFL team. Because I mean, Bishop, you play in the NFL, you play Division I football. Like, if anyone understands all this stuff, it's gonna be you. Like, you lived and breathed it for so long. Now you have an opportunity to maybe help. I mean, you're going to have tons of other duties if you take on like a director of athletics role like Scott Woodward, but you're also going to be able to help the next wave of athletes, maybe navigate some of these things because you yourself experienced it.
Yeah, I agree. I think, that's really been my main thing, is just looking to grow as a person and provide value in those spaces that I've, been in, and to like former athlete, or to other athletes, and younger athletes and former athletes, just be able to, my biggest thing is to provide insight and just share any advice I have to like about ways to navigate the high school space or the college football space, or during the pros, or like life after the game, and how to like transition from that, or steps you should be taking to like transition from playing football. And as I'm learning and discovering new things about myself, I'm looking for new ways to give back to younger athletes, and whether it be with sports stuff, student stuff, academic stuff. I think just approaching an athlete from like a holistic, like as a whole person, and looking at their like journey holistically. I think that's something that I aim to do and strive to do going forward. And I look to help like younger athletes coming up after me as well.
Was it hard to walk away from football and move on to this next chapter of your life? Like, I'm always curious about that. Once you make that decision, and again, it's not like it was finite necessarily, but once you made that decision, was it difficult for you, or did you struggle with it a little bit?
I mean, I definitely struggled, even to this day, some days you just miss it. And you're like, man, like, you miss playing, and you think back like of, how things, if this went that way, if that went that way, things may have been different. But I think through time, you sort of, the more action you take towards like your goals and new dreams, like you kind of, I guess, build the capacity to like move beyond the game and look forward to like future things that you have going on. And so, but I still miss it. Some days, I still miss playing. Even, the game ended for me sort of, I was in the CFL at the time. Like, after I played in the league, I kind of wasn't sure of my football future. Then I played for a startup league, the AAF. I don't know if like people remember what that is, but it didn't even last for like a whole season. I had a good time playing with my teammates, and like it was a good experience, but it just was unfortunate how it ended. And then after that, I played in the CFL towards the end of 2019 for like 2 weeks. I was in the CFL, and then they signed me for the 2020 season. And I was like, looking forward to really like preparing for that 2020 year. That was like the big comeback year for me. And I wanted to, ball out in the CFL and get another opportunity to potentially play in the league. And so obviously the CFL season was canceled in 2020 because of COVID and everything. And then same thing in 2021. While it wasn't canceled, it was postponed like, a few months. So at that point in time, I just kind of knew like it made better sense for me to like move on officially from the game, because given my age and position, like I was 29 years old, I was running back, and I hadn't played in a game in quite some time. So it just made sense to like officially move on and pursue other things. So that's kind of how my football journey ended. But I think, now it's good to actually be like working towards something long term. And through my football career, it's just provided so much, opportunities for me to work in sports, like, through like the NFL Players Association and other internship opportunities. And so I just try to like take advantage of that and utilize my experience as a player to go and continue to work in sports and do stuff going forward.
Bishop, what does it mean to be seen as more than just a football player?
I think it means a lot, I think I don't know. I think it's just like it's important to know that athletes are just more than their sport. They're human beings who are, capable of doing great things, not just in football, not just in their sport, but beyond that. And like I said, a lot of pro sports careers like end when the athletes are pretty young, like even the longest careers, like, I mean, unless you're like Tom Brady or someone, play into like, like mid-40s and like probably could play till he's like 60 and still ball out. But most athletes they're done by like, early 30s at the latest. And so I think it's just important to recognize like, athletes are more than just their sport, and these skills and traits that they develop while being an athlete can be used and transferable in other professions and other interests and other passions that they have. And so I think it's just a challenge because like athletes, our schedules are so I guess rigid, like up into the end of our pro career, because like pretty much our entire identity is spent like trying to be the best athlete. And it's a year-round thing, around the clock. Even in the off season, we're always working towards like being the best athlete. And there's always like a timeline, preseason, off-season training, preseason preparation, in-season games and recovery. And you kind of just have to be on this sort of like upward trajectory since like the time you begin playing. And so I think like when the game's over, like it's hard to sort of even if you consciously like tell yourself like you're more than a football player, more than an athlete, like sort of you just feel a little off because your body and mind is so used to just like pouring so much into the game, and that's really your sole purpose is like be the best athlete you can be, because that's what you've been doing forever. So I think it does take time. I think it takes time to become and grow and really, I guess, do things outside of your professional sport. But I think it's just important for athletes to be patient with themselves and just remain optimistic about the possibilities and start taking small steps towards like things outside of the game, and I guess to become more than an athlete and really, remember that you are more than an athlete and that you're capable of doing, whatever you put your mind to.
I love how you mentioned patience and small steps, because you're talking about that whole identity shift. Football, it's not who you are, it's what you do. In order to unravel all of that, once you move on, you 100% need patience, and you 110% need to take those small baby steps, over the course of a long period of time to unwind that rigidity and that schedule and that life, that you once had.
Whatever your interests are, because people often try to like say it's hard to find their passion. Some people say, oh, I don't know what my passion is outside of playing the game, outside of my sport. But it's like whatever you maybe like have the slightest interest in, that may be like a sign that that's something that could turn into a passion if you just begin taking steps towards learning more about what it is you're interested in, look to gain experience in what you're interested in, and just grow in those areas. So I think that's something to remember as well as like a former athlete.
I love that, man. So much knowledge, dude. Bishop Sankey dropping knowledge here. He's now a Juris Doctor candidate. I always mess that up. My brother's a lawyer as well. And so I remember when he graduated from law school, I was like, Juris Juris Doctor candidate at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. And when do you graduate, dude? When do you graduate from law school?
I graduate 2025, so that's when I'm scheduled to graduate. So I have 2 more years going into my second year, my 2L year, and I have my 2L year, 3L year. They say your 1L year is the hardest, so I'm hoping they're right. You know, I'm hoping like the tough parts behind me, but I'm just excited to learn and continue to grow, and then hopefully looking to give back in the sports realm still when I'm when I'm through with law school.
I'm excited to see where this journey takes you, man. I mean, it's been an absolute pleasure to hear your story from the beginnings all the way to where we are now in law school, and shoot for the stars, man.
Yeah, appreciate it. I think, yeah, my journey's been good so far. You know, I'm just looking to continue to grow and continue to, you know, I'm doing the law school. I'm in law school now, so you know, even with my internship this past summer, I've learned so much. And I was able to see sports from another vantage point. You know, see it through like sort of like agreements and looking at different sponsorship agreements and stuff like that. So that's been cool to see, because sports is such, like, everybody loves sports. I think it's such a big part of society. So for me, it's been good to explore the different areas of sports, like the business side, and then play as a player, and then like scouting and coaching, and kind of like connect the dots in that way. So it's been a really cool journey for me so far, and I'm, you know, looking to continue that going forward.
That is super cool that your internship with the Jacksonville Jaguars, how you're able to see the other side of it. Because before you were a player, now you're more on the legal admin side. Could you imagine if you went to law school first and then you played in the NFL? You would you'd be
Yeah,
negotiating the largest contracts, man.
yeah, not even that, but just like learning, well, that, but also learning like about just the business side, like marketing, and just sort of like how to utilize your brand outside of the field or off the field. I think like having that knowledge and seeing it from this point of view would have helped me as a player. And just like you see, like, it's not just like about like the athletes. That's a big part, is like being the best athlete you can become, but it's also about the experience, like the fan experience, and, you know, how athletes connect with fans. And I think a big way they do that is just through like the media, and different ways that like different ways that fans can see the game and connect with athletes, even with like social media now. You know, young fans connecting with athletes, and that's really what makes sports so great, is like it connects people, players and fans. And it's interesting to like be able to learn and see it from different vantage points, like how I'm doing now, and just seeing how it all works together. And ultimately, I think sports, you know, it just connects people from all different backgrounds, cultures, and it, you know, it inspires people to just be great and be their best selves. You know, like as a kid, when I was a fan, you know, I watched like athletes all the time, and I was so inspired by what they did on the field, and things that they learning about what they did off the field, and just like listening to little messages and commercials and stuff. So I think it's an important part of just the human experience in general. So it's cool to see sports like and how it works, and see the different areas.
It's an integral part to society. And I think, you know, this conversation, you know, I know a lot of people are going to get a lot of, whether you're a University of Washington alum or fan, or just an NFL or football fan in general. I'm excited for people to kind of hear, you know, what you've had to say about your journey, and just in a general sense about like how you can, you know, overcome some of those. We're all going to have obstacles in our lives. It always makes it a little bit easier when somebody who has played at the highest level, who has gone through those similar obstacles, can give you maybe a little bit of an insight on how you can navigate them. So I appreciate the time, man.
Yes, thank you, Collin. I really appreciate you for having me on, and I enjoyed the convo as well.